Hello and welcome to another Lunchtime Learning webinar from Robinson's Facility Services. Got loads of you online, so excited to get into this. I'm your host, Kevin Ayres, and just to say, if you haven't been on one of our webinars before, make sure you check out the website. There's loads of, we've got quite a number of these before, so you can have a look at this link below. You'll see previous webinars and a whole load of videos, some really useful stuff on the website that will help you look after your buildings, know what you need to do to stay compliant and keep everybody safe, healthy and happy. So do check that out. So what are we looking at today? Well, we are getting pretty super technical. We are getting into TM44 and TR19. And firstly, what the heck is that? Why is it important? Why do you need to know about it? Why do you need to stay on top of it? Well, don't ask me. That's why we've got our resident expert, Pia, who's going to be helping us figure out what those things are, why it's important, and how you can stay compliant. So let's, without further ado, welcome Pia.
Hello, everybody. Hey. Hi, Kevin. Hey. Thank you for having me.
Really excited to get into this. So I know, it's a pretty dry topic, right? So but like most of the things we cover in these webinars, they're super important. Just it's got a dry topic doesn't mean it's not important. Like most things in life, the drier it is, almost the more important it is, because we need to pay attention to it. We don't want it to to fall down the back of the sofa in our minds. And so I'm really pleased that you're going to talk us through it. Before we get into that, just while people are coming on, let them give them a little bit of chance to come aboard. What's it like with you? Because I don't know what's happened to the British summer. It's looking pretty murky outside here. What's it like with you?
Yeah, it is kind of the same. It's kind of the same. It's just we're just getting that sweaty heat up here in Newcastle. As you probably can infer from my Geordie accent, I'm not exactly a native, but can't quite complain, to be honest. We love to complain about the weather.
Is that an Italian accent? I'm guessing from the name. Is that an Italian accent? Yes, I only asked that because as of tomorrow, I am out of here. I'm off to Italy to a wedding next week, so very excited. So haven't been to Italy for many years, so
there you go. You're gonna have hopefully some meat to properly complain about.
Well, I've got myself. I'm a little bit thin on top now, so I bought myself a Panama. So hopefully it won't be too burnt.
Yeah, we share the same haircut. I was thinking before, and it's always a problem. Get yourself a Panama. You're gonna be all right.
Yeah, we were joking about this when we were setting up here. We go you look very similar to me, but without the facial hair. So it's just you've got a very impressive set of facial hair. So I don't think I could quite muster that, but. Anyway, look, without further ado, why don't we crack into this? We've got loads of people online. We've got over 30 people online, so thank you so much for watching. Just to kind of rules of the road, we'd love you to ask questions, so do feel free to make comments, questions. The way we do that is we might take one or two during the session, but to respect everybody's time, we'll probably leave the bulk of those towards the end. So if you want to ask Pia any questions, we'll deal with more of those in, but where it makes sense, we'll bring them in during the session. So, okay, so Pia, well, why don't we kick off with, what are TM44 and TR19? Why do they matter for commercial buildings?
Well, for two different reasons. TM44s are inspections of the air conditioning system. TR19 instead are interventions aimed at cleaning either grease extract systems or ventilation systems. So the first topic we're gonna talk about today is specifically related to air conditioning. Now, TM44 inspections were introduced in 2007. And they started to be enforced in 2011 as part of all those energy performance and building regulations that fall within the EPBD umbrella So a series of directives aimed at improving the energy performance of buildings. Why looking specifically at air conditioning? That is because air conditioning is notoriously one of those systems that are more energy demanding. They consume the most energy in all sorts of different types of facilities. As a consequence, this type of inspection has been introduced to make sure that the systems are running as efficiently as possible. The regulations then dictate several aspects we'll cover further down the line. For TR19 instead, we are more looking at a type of intervention which is more physical and has to do with reducing fire risk and improving the quality of the air circulating in a building. So while TM44s look at air conditioning, TR19 prevalently might look at ventilation systems in your hospitality type of buildings, restaurants, pubs, and systems, large ventilation systems in large buildings like hospitals, for instance, which might have a serious need for cleaning of debris or dust that can compromise the quality of the air that is circulating in the building.
So one's primarily about sort of how well is the system working from a green credentials point of view, efficiency point of view, and the other, like you say, is more about physical, what's actually going on in the ductwork itself, rather than just looking at a dial or something like that.
Yeah, and in the case of TR19, really, it's while we might joke about the fact that this might be one kind of a dry topic, these are all those facilities management details that take place behind the scenes and allow the machine to run. They allow the building to function properly. They allow people to be safe. When it comes to,
it's kind of one of those, because literally it's inside, you can't see it. So it's one of those kind of hidden risks, health risks, health and fire risk.
Fire hazard, absolutely.
Literally can't, it's not obvious, and it might be super well cleaned on the outside, and inside it's kind of disgusting. And by the way, we do have some photos, and this is one of those, if you're eating your lunch, I will warn you, but there is a moment you need to look away if you're eating your lunch. So, it's can be a bit grim.
Yeah.
So, well, look, for a TM44 what inspection, like what is that, and when would you need one?
Okay. Not all the buildings with air conditioning require TM44. To meet the legal requirement, a system needs to total 12 kilowatts of output or above. Just as a point of reference, this equals to 2 or 3 small wall-hanging cassettes or a multi-split. I'm going to try and not get too technical, but very small systems luckily do not require TM44s.
Like
this is
small office isn't going to trigger that.
Yes, this is a topic that we might reconnect to later when we speak about multi-occupancy buildings and where the responsibility lies with TM44s. But established that the threshold is 12 kilowatts, a system needs to be at least 5 years old. Now, there's a bit of detail there because we are often asked by the occupants what the requirements are for systems that have been partially renovated.
So what do you mean by system? Do you mean like the actual air conditioning unit itself, or the ductwork, or
No, I mean the actual air conditioning unit itself. There might be a point to highlight here. TM44 inspections interest the entirety of the building. So for the regulation, an air conditioning system is AC unit installed on a building. And the word installed is important because all portable units can be disregarded. They don't qualify for TM44s. But what I was trying to say is that if you have 10 systems and those systems have been installed 5 years ago, you need to obtain a TM44 to be compliant with legislation. If you have among those 10 systems installed just a couple of units over the past 2 years, you still need the TM44 because you have at least one unit that is 5 years old or older. If instead you have just inherited a building and you have installed a new system, say 3 years ago, you still have time. You still have a couple of years before the requirement applies. So these are,
without getting too, I don't want to go too much. I could imagine going down a little bit of a legal rabbit hole here, but say you've got one system that's 6 years old, you install a new system, but they're not connected, but they're in the same building. Do you have to have like separately, or does that still count as the system?
They still count as the system, and if both combined total 12 kilowatts or above, at that point, at the moment in which you install the new one, you are technically required to obtain a TM44. It's important to keep on top of this because there's fines that apply, and as we will show probably in a couple of minutes, everybody can check on the government register for your compliance status. And
why don't we? Yeah, good point. Why don't we dive into this and like what does this look like? So I know you've got some examples here. So this is kind of in outline, which you're not going to be able to read on the webinar. But I'm just going to sort of zoom in so you can talk us through a little bit. Like don't worry. By the way, we're not going to go through this line by line, but we're just going to go in broad outline. What the heck are we looking at, right? So let's have a look at this. So what is this showing us roughly?
Yeah, so this is the output of the system we use to produce TM44's reports. This specific version is a bit of an enhanced version that allows the client to have complete visibility on the energy consumption relative to each individual unit and understand how much in terms of monetary value running each individual unit costs them, so that they can possibly alter either the way they use them or intervene and speak with their maintenance provider to try and bring that cost down. Now, this first initial page will probably remind you of EPCs or display energy certificates, or those ratings.
Where I was going with that. So you've that is what I was going to say. So yeah.
Those ratings that are there, and in simply visual fashion show the user or the client or the user of the system how well that system is performing. There's information there on the total area that the systems are serving, which is an element that an assessor, when they visit a site, take good care in collecting and highlighting by taking measurements and looking at the floor plans. But then there's also the element of the total kilowatts output, which I have highlighted earlier. And as you probably can see there, an estimated cost per annum of running the system.
I imagine that's pretty useful, right? So like you say, you try to get a sense of what's this contributing to your overall bill, right?
Yeah, I mean, Kevin, in the end, we all realize that these legislations are in place for a good reason. However, when we are called upon to enforce them, to take care of the relevant steps to be compliant, sometimes they might feel like a tick box exercise. Adding this type of information to a report that must be done to be compliant gives the client an added value, and possibly in the long run, if those suggestions we add to the reports are implemented correctly, they kind of make up for the investment.
Right. So here we're seeing like specifically what could you do to improve efficiency? Like how much is that going to save you? And you can decide, well, is it worth the return, or because it's an annual saving, that probably needs to go on your maintenance list, prioritize maintenance list, right?
Yeah, and look, there's no obligation on acting on any of these recommendations. The only legal requirement is to obtain a certificate. These recommendations might be there also for your future budget. Okay, so I think they have a certain value for the client. And as you can see, these figures here, they are quite important. They're quite significant, and they overcome, say, the cost a client needs to face to obtain a certificate. So it's really a positive, I would say, being able to get into the details on consumption.
And like really easy, obvious ones, like this last one. Like, do you have the aircon running when there's nobody in the building, right? Or in the in that office, they're never in on Fridays. Why are we running the air conditioning? It's like it's obvious, but kind of not obvious, right?
Yeah, no, it's not. And most of the initial recommendations are made specifically around the temperature points and the controls, with the idea in mind to optimize, of course, the conditions of the environment versus the possible consumption. Once our assessors go on site and they observe the state of maintenance of the units, take note of their models to be able to input them in our system and obtain these calculations. They also manipulate the controls to see what's the scope of the system, and if there is a full range of availability in terms of what can be done simply by implementing some behavioral changes in the daily use of the system.
I mean, I imagine though, just like that middle one, you've got a set point at 19. If it's measuring out by like 2 degrees, you're literally overheating or underheating by 2 degrees, which can make a huge difference over the year, I'd imagine. Even just little things like that. Is it accurate, right? Which
yes,
I imagine drift.
And of course, this is not an holistic perspective on the energy efficiency of a building. We mentioned EPCs, but we could think about energy audits as well. This could be seen as an energy audit that focuses on the most expensive system to run. Yeah, and the difference in cost is also substantial, without thinking about the legal requirement, of course.
Yeah, and you also mentioned, just skipping on to this, so obviously all more. This is broken down, as you said. You can break it down by unit. But I thought this was quite interesting. I thought I had a sort of slight PTSD. I thought we were going to look at tax here for a sec, but it's not tax. So what are we looking at here?
Look, I might have a PTSD from looking at the screen as well, because this is where I spend most of the time when I'm at work. But this is a page of the government website. It's the government register where all the most important compliance certificates are lodged. Now, on the left-hand side, you can see that there's a search box. It mainly runs on postcodes. So once a postcode is input there, you get a full list of buildings within that postcode that, first of all, have valid or expired EPCs. That is the first type of certificate you see on the screenshot to the right of the screen. And this, again, you are probably familiar with those if you have purchased property or even a renting, probably. This is something that you look at. But then the second type of certificate, see, that's a known chain, kind of a retail unit. There's a TM44 lodged, which has expired in 2026. The certificate expired because TM44s are valid only for 5 years. which I think is an idea that the legislators had rightfully, given the fact that ownership of a unit might change during that period of time, new units might be installed, units might be removed, so the situation might actually change.
This is not primarily about safety, it's more about efficiency. So like it's kind of up to you, but it's not like safety critical. So we don't want it, it's not something we need to do every year.
No. This specific one was done then in June 2021. It's up for renewal. It's probably being worked on as we speak. But yeah, you have two separate links there when it comes to the air conditioning certificate. One is the actual piece of paper that certifies compliance with legislation. The other one is a report which follows a slightly different format compared to the one we have showed you, which is the output of our system. That slightly different format, however, contains very similar information, models, types, and recommendations on how to reduce energy consumption and improve performance on site. So what I would like to highlight on this is that hiding one's head in the sand when it comes to TM44s can be a bit risky, because everybody can access.
That, right?
Sorry?
Is that anyone can look them up, right?
Yeah, everybody can access the government register. Everybody can see if the site is compliant or not. Everybody can report to the trading standards issues of non-compliance. I don't have horror stories about competitors going and doing that specifically, but TM44s are one of those compliance certificates that if a company is going through an audit of some sort or an ISO accreditation, will make a difference. We often have requests, last-minute requests, prompted by this type of things, without thinking about, of course, the issue of the fines and of the enforcement from the local authorities, essentially. These fines, just as an additional piece of information, at the moment are about £300 per site when the site is found to be non-compliant, with an additional £200 recurring fine on top of the first one that can be applied all the way until the final report is produced to the authorities. There's talks to increase that fine all the way up to £800 in 2026 to essentially finance as well a little bit a more thorough enforcement as well from the authorities side. So the interest is not only on the side of the professional body of the assessors, but also on the side of the authorities that enforce it.
I mean, what was interesting to me is, if you haven't, I'll just check that off. What was interesting to me is it sort of seemed like from that report, it's probably like having a good accountant, right? Actually, this thing kind of costs you money to get, but actually the recommendations probably should really save you money. Like, depends how well you're running it, but if you haven't looked at it for 5 years, there's a good chance there'll be some recommendations you can put in place might be able to save you money, right?
Yeah, and whilst there's a lot of talks about the idea that one can spend some money as an investment, and recoup that money further down the line, and we are used to kind of look at this sort of dialectical angle as problematic. Look, in this case, it's more akin to going to a friend of yours to have your car checked, and a friend of yours will tell you, yeah, it's fine, go ahead, you can drive it. Or going through an MOT, which might highlight some issues that for you are not really relevant, or they might seem a bit too harsh. but in the long run will actually make the difference. That is why this type of legislation has been put in place in the end.
Well, like, you've got to do it anyway, but like the great thing is that potentially it actually saves you money. So it's not like it's no guarantee, but it might do, right? So that's a nice sort of silver lining to the thing, because you get this sort of value add when you get the report back. So okay, so I'm just conscious of time. What about TR19? Like, how does that differ? I know we talked about the physicality, but like, is there anything else you want to say in terms of the difference between TR19 and TM44 that we haven't covered already?
Yeah, look, if any client or any member of the audience is interested in looking up their compliance status for TM44s, we'll be happy to do that for them. We just need to, again, take a look at the government register. They can do that themselves. We can advise on the requirement, also based on the asset list. This is what we need to look at in order to price the job as well. When it comes to TR19 instead, ideally, we will need to take a look at the installation documents and drawings. Now, especially when it comes to restaurants or pubs that whose ownership goes from one person or a company to another, quite often that type of information is very difficult to find. As a consequence, the best approach for us to understand how to price a job and what type of clean is required, how many shifts are required to complete the job, is sending an operative on site for a free survey, which will produce a report that provides the client with an idea of the length of the ductwork and its access. Now, if we are talking about grease extract, which is a bit more complex than ventilation, which can be simply cleaned and then tested afterwards for microbiological debris or potential presence of bacteria. When it comes to grease extract, it's really important to understand how often a kitchen is used, and it really matters also what type of food is prepared there. You might probably imagine there are a place that deals just with sushi might have a ductwork that is substantially cleaner compared to a burger joint. There's much less grease extracted. There's a different type of cooking that takes place. So we take into account all these elements. As I said, once the report from a site survey comes back, we understand also how long it's going to take to clean it. Now, in order to clean a grease extract system, a ductwork, we'll need to, identify its length, but also make sure that we can access all its parts. For two reasons.
See what we actually mean by that. Here's what are we looking at here? Some filters.
These are simple filters that can be seen just by accessing the kitchen. They are usually exposed, and as you can see in the left-hand side picture, they are the first barrier between the cooking surface and the ductwork, and they can get really, really nasty for that reason. This is kind of the most external part of the clean, which is still required when it comes to insurance purposes and fire risk. Those debris that you can see on the left-hand side, they can still catch fire, essentially, and they will need to be.
The great thing about those is you can see them, right? But I guess it gets worse, right? Because then you've got all of this out of sight, out of mind stuff.
See, this is piece of ductwork that is at an angle. The little window that you can see on the leftmost side is where the filters we've seen in the
Oh,
previous
okay.
picture.
Right. A bit like a domestic
located.
filter over the hob kind of thing.
Yes, they're being removed, and this is probably the first bit of the ductwork that our operatives have gone ahead and cleaned. I'm always surprised by the difference in color. I've often, when I started working in this field, I've often asked my colleagues if there were any differences in light, in filters, in angles, in camera angles, but the answer is unfortunately not. That is just grease. And look,
that's a lot of berry liquid you're gonna have to use to get that off, right? I'm guessing you don't use that. You used to be a little bit more industrial, but that's a lot of grease. Yeah.
Yes, yeah, it's a specialized series of products that my colleagues use, and there's also a mechanical component to the clean, which can be probably seen in the right-hand side
I noticed that,
of the picture. Yeah, there's some kind of circular markings on the side of the ductwork. I imagine that is the result of the use of a mechanical cleaner.
Sure.
that is required in some instances.
And I've got one more, and then if you're eating lunch for the next one, you need to look away. So.
Yes. This is a similar situation. Is probably the other angle from the same access point. On the right hand side, in this case, though, part of the initial filters have been put back. On the left hand side, we can see them still removed, and the difference is substantial. It's
quite fiddly, isn't it? It's actually quite difficult to get in some of those nooks and crannies, I guess.
It's a really complex job also on that front, and I was about to touch on that topic, the topic of access. So we are not used to look at ductwork. We usually tend to hide it behind hopefully accessible ceiling tiles. However, access panels to comply with regulations need to be installed every 3 meters within the length of the ductwork. Now, this is being set to allow an operative to reach the inside of the ductwork with their arm on both sides and clean it manually, or been using a rotary brush in that case. So there might be a need to install additional access panels. You will be surprised by the fact that installers do not take care of that aspect. They simply worry about installing the system and making it accessible for other types of.
Well, it adds cost, and then the client doesn't want to pay the cost, and and then you realize, oh, I've got a problem later, right?
Yeah, and without getting too much into detail, our quotations are always inclusive of the number of access panels that we envisage might be required following the initial inspection. We provide the client also with a clear drawing of where these panels have been installed. And just like in this picture, we provide clients with before and after pictures to show them that the install of these small access panels has taken place in a clean and neat manner. And that's part of the job, simply required to access the ductwork. Another issue of access might arise when it comes to the risers. So ductwork comes out of the building at a certain point.
One more. I think we've got one more. There's a
So you see that here there's an access hatch on the right-hand side, and I am not sure if in this case is one of the ones that we install or it was a pre-existing one. Mind you that this is your typical burger joint that we are looking at. So this is the amount of grease that collects in those ductworks. It's important to notice that all the grease is a fire hazard.
Yeah, I mean, I was just thinking, oh my goodness, like that finds a source of ignition and you're in trouble, right?
Yeah, and without access panels, without means to observe the ductwork, we cannot know even if the clean has been performed properly.
Yeah.
One of the problems that we come in and encounter on systems we've not worked before ourselves is that some operatives or some kitchen staff as well, they think that the reach that they have without the installation of additional panels, without the use of rotary brush, will be enough to clean the ductwork. And there's a legend that the fire department doesn't quite like about the fact that fire doesn't spread if there's just patches of grease here and there. The truth is that fire spreads even if there's patches that are clean and patches that are not clean. So the way to go about doing it is inspecting everything, and is providing the client with a report that shows them that the job has been carried out properly.
I don't know about you. If I'm working in a kitchen, I am not cleaning that out anyway. I'm changing jobs. If you're asking me to do that, that's disgusting. That's especially I don't have the gear, right?
There's a lot of kitchen staff that tell us that look, they clean the filters themselves. So that first picture that we showed the audience, that was showing the filters, and that's it. Unfortunately, as we see, that is just
like the tip of the iceberg, right? This is the bit you need to look away if you're eating. Okay, so you have been warned. So that's another one, and then like that's the result, right? It's pretty gross.
Yeah,
right?
we dispose then ourselves, of course, of all the debris that we remove, and we leave the site as clean as we found it. This is one of those a really simple one, but one of those diagrams that show the kind of the ductwork geography to clients, and give them an idea of where vents have been installed, where access panels have been installed as well. Part of this job is now on the right-hand side. You see that there's dark color fire damper. Some of these systems have some dampers that are triggered by either temperature or smoke. And one of the things that we do is test them. Again, to connect to the idea that this is all that work that takes place behind the scenes, and if it doesn't take place, systems break down. If you don't test these systems periodically, you might find that they are not working when they should, and you don't play with these sort of things, with this sort of systems.
Just a quick one. I'm just conscious of time because we've I can't believe how long we've talked about this. It's what did you talk about today at work? So you mentioned it early on, and it's an issue we find a lot with some of the topics that we talk about. So let's talk briefly about who's responsible for both TM44 and TR19 compliance if it's like a multi-let and managed building, because that's going to be the situation for a lot of people watching, or they might be managing those buildings.
Yes, look, for this is the multi-let managed building scenario is not really a big issue when it comes to identifying responsibility for TR19. Usually the user of the kitchen is responsible. We have a lot of hotels we take care of. Often the restaurants are, of course, franchised. The hotels themselves are franchised. So in that case, if there's an external company that is working in the kitchen, those people are responsible for
Would they be responsible, because you mentioned about access panels? If I'm leasing a building, am I responsible as the leaser to make sure that there are enough, that the ductwork's fit for purpose, like there are enough access panels, and then it's the responsibility, presumably, of the user to clean it? Is that how it works?
Yes, that is technically how it is. In fact, sometimes we encounter the need to kind of escalate from tenant or user to owner of the system, owner of the building, when it comes to obtain the permission to install access panels. And usually the client and the landlord discuss them between themselves, who is going to take ownership of facing the bill for the installation of the access panels, while usually the entity that faces the bill for the clean is the one using the kitchen. When it comes to TM44 instead, it's slightly more complicated than that. The most complex possible scenario is multi-occupancy office building. Okay, the landlord is responsible for units that serve common areas.
Right, yeah.
And is responsible for all the other units that he can control and that he has maintenance responsibility on. So if the air conditioning system is centralized, it's the landlord's responsibility.
Sure.
There are some instances in which you have some smaller offices within a building of this type, and they own and operate and maintain their own units.
Yeah.
In that case, they have the responsibility for their own
TM44. Have air conditioning, and they decide, yeah, we want an air conditioning unit for our office with lots of computers or something. Yeah. So in that scenario, they would be responsible.
A little note on that is that if the office is small enough, a company might use a portable unit. That portable unit needs to be discarded. They will not need the TM44. If the office is small enough as well, they might fall below the 12 kilowatt threshold and not qualify for a TM44. So the issue lies simply with the responsibility lies simply with the landlord in that case.
Sure. I think that's pretty clear. Now, we're almost, time's almost up. So you've been very shy today. I've had no comments at all today. They're just shocked at your brilliance, and you've made it so clear for everyone, Pier. So that's brilliant. Yeah, just last chance to ask Pier any questions. So do fire us some questions if you would like. But failing that, thank you so much for watching. As I said before, if you would like to, there's a whole load of videos that you can see on the Robinsons website, Robinsons Facility Services. So go to www.robinsonsfs.com/video, and you'll see my lovely face talking to lots of lovely people about similar kind of topics. And a colleague of mine also, Joe, talking about a whole range of other there's a whole load of really useful little videos there for you to check out as well. But look, so looks like we've got don't think we've got any more comments here. So look, I just want to say a big thank you to you. Thank you all for watching, and I will see you next time on Robinsons Facilities Services Lunchtime Learning webinar. Thanks for watching.
Thank you, Kevin.